Hello, I'm Dr. Laura Davis, and this is a mini lecture on Margaret Atwood's novel called The Testaments. And I'm going to be talking today about chapters 21 to 30. So where we left off after chapter 20 is that Daisy has just found out that Neil and Melanie are not her real parents. She has also had the blow of finding out that Neil and Melanie were blown up in a car bomb outside of the Clothes Hound. So Ada has picked her up at school and has broken this news to her. And it seems at this point that that Daisy is on the run with Ada, and the reader at this point is unclear as to exactly who is after Neil and Melanie. We've been kind of getting hints that something has been off and someone has been after them. For example, Daisy has told us that there are no baby pictures of her, that her parents are overprotective compared to other parents, and there seems to be a few things that are a little bit odd. Before we get to this point as well, we have had Daisy at the march, which Neil and Melanie were not happy about her going to that protest, and especially knowing that she did, against their will, go to the protest, and that the media would have images of her. So they had, we kind of left off there with them wanting to be on the move, and next thing we know, while Daisy's at school, her parents get blown up. Ada picks her up from school. The other thing that's kind of significant about this is that it happens to be Daisy's 16th birthday. So another blow to Daisy on her 16th birthday. There's this horrific thing happens. And so she's just been given that news. And we, the readers, are trying to follow along, trying to figure out who the heck is after her. We have a sense it has something to do with Gilead. We don't really know much other than that. So, as I said, Ada starts taking her from place to place, and at first they go to Sanctuacare, and we get a few kind of threads filled in at this point. So we'll know the clues that Daisy has told us, that that Ada comes and picks up clothing. She has always arrives in a different car at the Clothes Hound, right? Previously she told us this, and she picks up clothing and she says it's for donation, and Daisy doesn't really know where this clothing from the Clothes Hound goes. Well, after Ada picks her up and tells her this horrific news, she takes her to Sanctuacare, and we find out that this is a place where refugees come from Gilead. So those handmaids and escapees who have escaped Gilead come to Canada as refugees, and Neil and Melanie, we find out, were aiding them at Sanctuacare, and Ada was also part of this, and so a lot of these donated clothes ended up going to Sanctuacare. So Daisy is taken there by Ada, told not to say much, and she's just being taken care of by the volunteers and the workers at Sanctuacare, and she kind of looks around and sees and kind of understands that her parents were part of this whole system, and again is wondering what the larger picture is. The next place Ada takes her, after she takes her there, is to Carnavan, and the whole section, part 8, is called Carnavan. Now, in my notes that you will have seen on the previous chapters, I really talk about individual words and titles and the significance of them. So this one is one to think about as well. If you look up Carnavan, it's a castle. Now, there's some discussion of it at the beginning of page 22 when Ada first brings Daisy there, and Daisy says, "Why are we going here? What is this place?" And she says, well, it's a rooming house. It was a rooming house. It's become changed into apartments. So this place, Carnavan, where she goes, has had different uses over time, right? And there's a kind of trope of this sort of thing going on. We get Daisy's neighborhood described in Canada as one where the houses are plain, and Neil and Melanie make sure their house looks plain, but yet these homes are constantly being renovated and changed. And so here we have this place that, if you look at the description, is kind of castle-like. And Carnavan is it's a castle a Welsh castle of medieval times. And so when Daisy asks Ada, you know, what is this place or where does this name come from? She says Welsh. Someone must have been homesick, you know, because someone named this place after the castle in Carnavan. So there's some significance to that, and the fact that they're in this place that has had numerous uses, and also that it's really kind of like a castle, right? And you can see how that's described, the big banister and the stairs that Daisy's taken up. And she's kind of in a haze and in a sleep, much like a daze, a sleep, a kind of grogginess, much like Agnes is earlier. And so there's a sense of, or was it Daisy earlier? I think it might have been Daisy earlier, and there's a reference that I referred to in my previous notes to Sleeping Beauty in that sense. So I would suggest that in this part, there is another literary allusion, an allusion to a fairy tale, which is that of Rapunzel. Now remember that Rapunzel is kind of stuck in a tower, a castle of sorts, like this Carnavan is described, and it's on her 16th birthday that she makes a wish to see more of the world. And of course, at this moment, it is Daisy's 16th birthday as well. Now, of course, soon, it is very early within this section that we find out, we get another revelation, okay? Not only that Neil and Melanie have died, but also that this actually isn't her real 16th birthday. So Daisy is really getting her whole sense of identity thrown in her face here. She is, on her 16th birthday, she is having to face the fact that she is an entirely different person from who she thought she was. Now, in a sense, I think that Atwood is drawing on this kind of coming of age novel, the Bildungsroman novel, with both Agnes's story and Daisy's, which parallel one another. And they both find out these things that have to do with their own identity and their own selves and sort of growing up at these significant moments in time, like the moment of adolescence, like the moment of one's 16th birthday, which is seen as kind of a milestone birthday, right? So the two stories parallel each other. We get the sense of coming to understand the self and know the self, moving from girlhood to adulthood. But certainly in this case, we get an absolute disruption of the previous identity. So the next revelation that comes, other than the fact that Neil and Melanie have died and that it's not her real 16th birthday, is that in fact Daisy is baby Nicole. Now we've heard of baby Nicole as this notorious figure that Gilead is trying to get back, because Gilead believes, and their story is that baby Nicole is Gilead's property, that the baby was stolen and brought into Canada illegally. Well, I think that the reader is sympathetic to the fact that baby Nicole was brought into Canada because baby Nicole was likely the baby of a handmaid, and the handmaid escaped and ended up in Sanctuacare with baby Nicole. So this, again, revelation that Daisy has that she is in fact baby Nicole is a hugely disruptive thing for her own sense of identity. And she's really, in these chapters, just trying to take this in. As well, they're constantly on the run, because now she realizes, well, I am baby Nicole. I am who all of Gilead is after. And she has to, even though she has this revelation of her identity, she has to hide her identity and cannot let it be known that that's who she is. So on the one hand, we have, I'm going to move into Aunt Lydia's part in a minute. We have, on the one hand, Daisy and Mayday on the Canadian side, who's actively trying to protect baby Nicole herself. Ada and others are trying to protect Daisy. And on the flip side, we have, at the same time, and we find this out through Lydia's narration, we have Gilead reveling in the fact that they identified Melanie and Neil as workers for Mayday and are on baby Nicole's trail. They have the clue that their daughter might actually be, or the person they were looking after, their ostensible daughter, might actually be baby Nicole. So they are trying to get baby Nicole back. On the other hand, Mayday is trying to destroy Gilead. So we have these two opposing forces, and we're getting both sides of the story here. So when we go back into Lydia's story, this is the Gilead side, right? And but the narration, the story starts to get very dark when we hear these stories from Aunt Lydia, because at this point it starts to go into Lydia's past and the origins of Gilead. And we've got a little bit of that before chapter 1, but we get further into it around chapter, I think, 24, which is part 9, called Thank Tank. Right, so again, we can meditate on the words. She's making a play off of think tank. We have that section is, as I said, quite dark. Goes into how Lydia and other women were broken in a system of absolute imprisonment, abuse, violence against them, in order to break them down, to either kill them or take them in to be part of Gilead. Is kind of one of those narratives where it's like, you're either with us or against us. If you don't buy into the system, if we don't see you buying into the system, we will kill you. Otherwise, you can help us. So Lydia gets identified as someone who has made it through all of this abuse and and she has no choice really. She's cooperating with the new regime, Gilead, which is headed by Commander Judd. Now, I think I said this in the notes that Commander Judd Atwood describes him as somebody, through Lydia's narration, right, as somebody who's always seeking a younger wife and actually kills off his wives subtly so that he can get another child bride. And we might think, I said this in my notes, we might think of somebody like King Henry VIII, right, who is infamous for doing exactly that, having had six or so younger wives and beheaded a few of them and so on. So Atwood has said that everything in her novel has some kind of historical precedent. Maybe not exactly, but she's kind of drawing off of these precedents. I also want to mention with the Aunt Lydia narrative that we get the sense that this may be a revenge narrative. This is a little bit of a clue, perhaps, for what's to come. But take heed, pay attention to the part where when she is absolutely at her lowest, in, for example, the think tank, being imprisoned and abused and thinking she might die. She says that her eyes cried, but that there was a third eye, and that eye was watching, and that eye basically made the pact. She made the pact to herself with her third eye that she was watching, that she would get revenge on Commander Judd at some point, somehow. Okay, so just keep that in mind, because I think this notion of the revenge narrative is really interesting, especially because we've recently studied Margaret Atwood's story, Stone Mattress, which was also a revenge narrative. Okay, so I wanted to touch again one more thing, which is the idea of the messenger. I mentioned this again in my notes, but I think this is kind of a theme that runs through, is the notion of the messenger. And as I've said, Agnes's story parallels Daisy's story. Now, that they are different, but they parallel one another. So we have Daisy turning 16. Soon she's going to meet Garth, who's kind of going to be her trainer. That's in the chapters to come. In Agnes's story, she's being prepared for marriage, which she actively resists, but she really has no choice. She's a young girl that has to be married, and she's going to be married to a high commander. Now, seeing as Judd has told Lydia that his current wife is starting to feel ill and is ailing, That's a kind of heads up. He's probably gonna get rid of her fairly soon, from whatever means, you know, it'll look like sickness, but whatever happens to her. He tends to sort of subtly kill off his wives, and he's gonna want a younger wife. Now, I think as readers at this point, we can maybe guess that that new wife might be Agnes, seeing as she's being prepared to marry a high-up commander. And if in fact it is going to be Agnes, this is not good news for Agnes. It basically means that she's going to live a short life, because all of Judd's wives do, right? So anyway, we can kind of look at that to come. In terms of the messenger theme, Shamanite, so friends with Agnes are Shamanite and Becky. Shamanite has kind of given, well, she has given Agnes the news that her mother Tabitha was not her real mother, that she was actually born by a handmaid. And because of Shamanite's kind of vague memories of running through the forest, holding her mother's hand, she kind of suddenly realizes, wow, that wasn't Tabitha's hand. And she is another version now of the tale that Tabitha told her. So Shamanite is the messenger of that truth that Agnes becomes aware of. And similarly, we have with Daisy's story, Ada becomes the messenger for Daisy, that tells her a different kind of truth, one which is shocking to Daisy, and she has to understand that Neil and Melanie were not her real parents and who she really is. So there are kind of these messenger figures that tell truth to others. So we've seen Ada, we've seen Shamanite in the two different narratives, Agnes's and Daisy's, that, as I've said, parallel each other. And again, keep in mind that notion of the messenger theme, because it will continue as well. Thank you very much for listening today.